One year, when I was at the West Riding Small Locomotive Society, a man came with his engine, and it was a beautiful Black 5, really, really nice. And he said, I never clean the frames, I just leave them dirty because that's what they were like on the full size. And I think maybe he has a point, but in this case I've got Alexander Karnes, who's currently cleaning up my frames, which is very kind of him. What a very nice man.
Well, don't thank me, Mr. Appleton. Thank the discipline of the pre-grouping days, because I really don't agree. You know, in the BR days, which all the people alive remember now, and the engines looking like absolute hell, and everything, you know, scale running down from the water fittings and nothing being washed. That's not how it was, especially not in the heyday. In fact, when they started you off as a fitter boy, you know, 14, 15 years old, the first thing they would do on one of those Victorian engines like a Dean Single is quite often they'd have you polish the dome, the big brass dome. And if you didn't get it right, you'd just be sacked. And the thing is, they didn't have time for you if you didn't have enough patience and attention to do that and do it right. And, you know, it's not just an aesthetic thing. It's a pride thing, because when you're proud of your work, you do your work better, don't you? And for another thing, the less crud there is on the engine, the less it'll get into the moving parts, and the less you're going to wear down the locomotive as it runs over the period of its life. So there was a reason for the things to be absolutely clean and spit shine. And that's something that we didn't really understand in the United States after... really after the turn of the century. We used to take care of things, but we sort of lost that long before, you know, when everything became more businesslike and more focused on money. You Brits, I think, retained it for a longer time. An ounce of preventative is worth a pound of cure. That's even more true with a steam locomotive. The more of this we scrape off now, the less it's going to get into the bearings and ball races and all the rest of it. Well, besides me working on them incessantly to let us steam up the engine, which I will win with, by the way, I will win out.
No, you won't.
Yes, I will.
No, you won't.
Yes, I will.
Certainly not.
No.
I refuse.
No, I will. It's just going to happen. But I've been watching Mr. Appleton's videos for years, no doubt with a lot of the other disenfranchised young steam people in the United States and a lot of the enthusiasts around the world. And I never really thought I'd be sitting here in his workshop doing slave labor for him. But now that I am, it sort of feels natural, you know, and I'm very, very thankful to him for having me here.
Excuse me. Can you work faster?
Yeah, yes, sir, Mr. Boss. So right now we're using a pretty decent solvent to clean all the crap off the underside of this engine. It's naphtha. Something a lot of people may not know is that the Americans, we had a fairly mental type of engine called a naphtha engine. And you'll think, oh, it burned this like gasoline in an internal combustion format. No, not in the slightest. It had a boiler, right, and a fuel tank. The fuel tank was full of naphtha. The boiler was also full of naphtha. The fire was a naphtha fire, right? Big fire burning underneath the boiler, which boiled naphtha in the boiler. The naphtha boiled into naphthalene vapor, or whatever they called it. It went into the cylinders and drove the engine. And so the naphtha was the working fluid, the fuel, and the lubricant. And they worked. The only thing is, you really hope you never developed any sort of leak at all, because if you did, it wouldn't turn out very well. The other thing about naphtha is, I'm not very jumpy around many things, but it should be known that naphtha is a very, very powerful carcinogen, and I believe a neurotoxin as well.
Yeah, so you're holding it right under your nose.
Of course.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah.
You've got to die of something. It's no good being in hospital dying of nothing specific.
No, and the other thing is that, you know, I'm very, very good friends with these things like asbestos and mercury and all this stuff, and it won't hurt you unless you snort the stuff like cocaine or eat it.
Health and safety notice. What Alexander Karnes is currently saying, I don't recommend.
Well, I've turned out all right, haven't I? Now I just have to get footage where my finger falls off. Or something. Anyway, yeah, it's another interesting tidbit about naphtha. And another interesting thing, I've run a naphtha engine, one of the few in the United States. I've run it. And they've got another one at Mystic Seaport where I used to volunteer. So they are around. And they were most commonly found driving small launch-type boats. Although a naphtha engine has absolutely nothing on a soda engine. And I would tell you how it works right now, but unfortunately I've forgotten. But though you talk about something dangerous and experimental. A caustic soda locomotive is about as bad as it gets. And we could talk about that once I've got the diagram in front of me, because I can't remember how those work. They're just diabolical.
So you really do want to have a run on this small thing?
Oh yes, I do. It's a horrible addiction. It doesn't matter how big or small they are.
Well, okay then, thinking about it, if you clean the track, then maybe it's a feasibility.
Right.
The only problem is, let me trim the bushes, because there's a particular bush in the garden that is a real problem. It's a very angry bush.
Poisonous?
No, I used to have a girlfriend like that. It's a very angry bush, and once my wife trimmed this, and I was running the railway, and a couple of times the trimmed edges brushed past my face, and the next morning I woke up looking like Elephant Man.
Well, you look like that anyway all the time.
Oh, I knew I was doing it wrong.
You know, a lot of strange things happen at Mr. Appleton's house. I've only in the span of my life been to a couple of gateways to the Muppet dimension, but I think this workshop is one of them. I just sort of have to ignore what's going on and keep going, don't I?
What do you mean? Oh, the Action Man, yeah. The trouble is, I've lost my proper Action Man. I always have an Action Man close at hand. Not that I'm weird or anything, but an Action Man is 1 foot tall, and it's very useful for scale. If you want to look at the brick sizes for an engine, then look at your Action Man. The brick needs to be slightly bigger than his hand, type of thing. But one Action Man in particular, I generally hang from a shelf. And in a video quite a while back, he was hung from the shelf as usual.
By his neck.
By his neck, yeah. Well, it wouldn't be right to hang him by his feet.
No. So, if you'll probably notice that when you clean an engine with naphtha, it leaves behind this white residue. I still don't know what it is, but what I do know, a good way to combat it is after you've done, if you take some WD-40 or you mix some oil in with the naphtha to give it one final wipe down, the white residue does not appear. This is, of course, no good if you're going to paint the parts. You have to have very, very specific dry surface prep. And in fact, scoring up the surface a bit will, of course, help your paint attach. With brass, you want to use a brass etch. As I understand it, Mr. Appleton has been trying out a new hand wash to get all the grime off of his hands. I'm right now pretty clean for my standards, and the thing is, it's not at all usual to see me cleaning myself until the very end of the day. I would used to get black and rust covered on the waterworks engines or when I clean out a boiler, and then at the end of the day, I just go and dunk myself in an acid bath, a bit like Keith's wife, except I usually come out of it alive.
Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website. Click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you will find it very easy to find other videos that you may like to watch.